Good morning. Today is July the 5th, 2006. My name is Helen Abrahamson, Helen Kaplan Abrahamson. What else was I?
Tell me where you were born.
I was born in Omaha, January the 6th, 1931, and I've lived here all my life, and my children live here, and we were married 57 years in January, and my husband is Harold, and we now live at 78th and Jackson, and I can start at kindergarten at Lake School.
Well, first, Helen, tell me about your parents and grandparents.
Okay, my mother was Jenny Friedman Kaplan. My father was David Kaplan. They were married about 3 or 4 years and had me, and then they got a divorce when I was about 3 years old or 4 years old, in that vicinity. And so my mother moved in with my grandparents, and I started Lake School, and I continued through Lake School. And when I got through the 8th grade, I went to Central High School, and it was very nice living with my grandparents. And in the very beginning, they had 3 sons, and 2 sons were living there when my mother and I were living there, and it was a 2-bedroom house. So you can imagine there were beds throughout the house. There was one in the dining room and one in the kitchen, and 2 in one bedroom and one in another bedroom. So we all had sleeping space. And
Tell me who they were, their names.
Oh, the names? Well, my grandmother was Ann, my grandfather was Abe, my uncles were Sam and Harry and Howard, and my mother was second to the oldest. And let's see, they all got married, and one of them lived in Omaha, Harry and Miriam Friedman, and my Aunt Miriam is still alive, all my uncles have passed away, and my mother has passed away. And let's see, where do I go from here?
Tell me a little bit about your grandparents.
My grandparents, they were 2 little short people, really. And my grandfather was a window washer, and so he would take his pail and all his paraphernalia and walk and find different companies that would hire him to wash their windows. And then he would come home and rest. And then after a while, he decided maybe the window washing business wasn't that great. So he got himself an old truck, and he would go around and he would peddle some fruit and vegetables. And my grandmother was a stay-at-home lady and a cooking lady. And she's a very sweet lady, really was. And my mother had to go to work because she had to support us. So she worked at Appleman Robinson, her first job. And then after that, she worked for Aaron Farrer and Sons for many years till she retired. And even after she retired, she found a job and went to work for, I don't remember the name of it. I think it was Omaha Steel. And she was a secretary, and she worked in the office. And she enjoyed it. She really did. That's probably why after she retired, she found a job to work. And what else?
Were you an only child?
I was an only child. My mother remarried in 1960 to Ben Sosnick, and they married in July, and I believe it was October. He passed away of a heart attack. So she just had a short second marriage, and after that she never married again. In fact, she lived with me for a while after that. And we have, still on the grandparents?
No, I want you to tell me a little bit about going to elementary school.
Oh, going to elementary school? Well, I enjoyed Lake School. I really did. And of course, there were some blacks, and there were some whites, and there were a few Jewish ones. In fact, my best girlfriend was Dorothy Perlman, and she lived on 20th Street, and I lived on 19th Street. So we would meet and walk to school and back, and we were friends for a very, very long time. I enjoyed Lake School. I enjoyed the teachers, and I enjoyed the friends that I met there. I really did. I had a nice time at Lake School. And then after Lake School, I went to Central High School. and graduated from Central. And then very shortly after that, I got married.
I want to hear about 19th Street where you lived growing
19th
up.
Street. Well, you
Your
didn't,
neighbors.
You didn't live too far from me. Let's see. On one side of me was the Yarmolniks, which shortened and went to Molnik. Yarmolnik and his wife was on one side of me. On the other side of me were two old spinster ladies, Eva and Frances. I don't remember their last name. And then their brother came and lived with them after his wife passed away. So that was on the other side. Next to them was Louis and David Bernstein. And next to the Bernsteins were the Gendlers. And after that, it was quite a few houses in between, and it was Milton Sosnick. Across the street were the Shermans, Reva Sherman and Gertrude Sherman. Across the street from me was Faye Adele, and they had a little house on their lot, and Roz Conan lived there with her mother and their sisters Frances, and I forgot the other one's name. And in the evening, Faye Adele, who lived right across the street from me, would play her accordion. And it was very pretty. We would just sit out on the front porch and just listen to her play her accordion. Let's see what else. Oh, and around the corner was Elaine Whiteman. And we had many, many, many Jewish neighbors at that time. We really did. And it was a fun neighborhood. In the evening, we'd get together and play hide and seek and all kinds of different games. It was a fun neighborhood growing up.
Who are some of your best friends?
And the best friends, well, you mean in the neighborhood, or my best friends were the Gendlers and the Bernsteins. Those were my best friends. And we'd get together and we'd go to the show. We'd walk to the Corby and watch the movie on Saturday, have enough for a candy bar, popcorn, and to pay our way into the show. And we had some good times. We really did.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the relatives you have?
Some of my relatives? Well, my favorite relative was my Uncle Sam. And he worked for the Unionist Publishing Company, and he would sell ads in the newspaper for them. And he would work out of our house. And so he would have cards written up with each company's name on it and a bunch of things that meant something to him. To somebody else it probably didn't. But he would go through and call them each time a big edition came out. And sometimes he would take me with him when he went to pick up some of the different papers that he needed for that in little towns. And one time he took me to Paxton Billiards, and my mother found out, and she was just so angry at him. Why would he would take me to a place like that? But I thought it was nice. And let's see, my other uncles I wasn't as close to my other uncles. Maybe it's because one went into the service right away, my Uncle Howard, and got married, and my Uncle Harry got married and moved out. So it was just me and my grandparents and my mother that were left all during the war years. And so I like my other uncles, but I was never quite as close to them as I was to my Uncle Sam. He was tops.
What were holidays like at the house?
Holidays were really not such a big deal at our house. My grandfather, if you meant the Jewish holidays, my grandfather would go to the synagogue. There was a little synagogue on 19th Street. Do you remember the house? And he would go there, and whenever they needed somebody to make a minyan, they would call him, and he would go there. Also, he would go down to the Jewish funeral home and sit with the body. You remember when that had to be done? And he would sit with the body, and they would call him all different hours, even at night, and he would get up and go. And he was an interesting man, he really was. And then before Passover, he went out, I believe it was a Roberts farm, and he would check to make sure that all the things for Passover were the special ones. And so he had little jobs along the way. He was, like I say, he was an interesting person. He really was. And we had a nice life. It was quiet. We were all poor, the whole neighborhood, you know, nobody was, well, maybe the gamblers, I take it back. They had Liberty Gas and Oil, and they were always not wanting. But other than that, we were all practically in the same boat. And it was a nice neighborhood to grow up in. I enjoyed it.
What were some of your favorite times with your grandparents?
With my grandparents, well, let me think. Sometimes we would play gin rummy, and we really didn't, we really didn't go as trips were, except a couple times. One time we went out to Lenoma Beach. It was one of the holidays, 4th of July or Labor Day, and so we went out there and we had a picnic and we went swimming, and that was nice. But I had had some ducks that my Uncle Sam had bought me, and one of them had fallen off of the porch, I guess, and his leg he couldn't quite walk right after that. Well, by the time it was the 4th of July, I think he bought it around Easter time. It was part of the dinner, and needless to say, my uncle was kidding me, and he says, "That's Oscar," and that was the name of the duck, and I didn't eat it. Needless to say, I didn't eat anything that day. But poor Oscar, he got he got fried and eaten. What can I tell you? And let's see what else. Oh, we made a trip to a place in Iowa where when my grandfather and grandmother came over, they stayed there for a little while, and I forgot what little town in Iowa it was. It wasn't really far away, but it was like almost a day to get there. And I don't know, my grandfather would get on the bus and go all the way to New York to visit his sister that lived there. But my grandmother didn't travel. She stayed home. I don't think she really was a well person. And so she stayed home, and my grandfather did the traveling.
Tell me about your high school days.
Oh, my high school days? Well, they were fun days. Like I say, I had my girlfriend Dorothy Perlman and we would go to some football games, and we would go to some movies. I don't know. The time just went. When you're little, you really don't remember it all, but it was all nice. It really was. And I had another friend that lived on 19th Street further down than the Gendlers, and that was Elaine Lashinsky. She's Elaine Tepperman now. And so we got to be buddies, and we went to shows together and did some things together. But I think she went to Kellam and I went to Lake, so school-wise we weren't together. And I got to meet her family, and that was a nice family. But like I say, none of us really had a lot of money. We just did little things. If we ever went on a vacation, that was really something. Later on, my mother did take me to Okoboji, and we went on a bus. And we had fun, though. We really did. And after that, Okoboji was one of our favorite places. And after I got married, we took our family and went to Okoboji almost every summer. So,
were you involved in any activities while you were in high school?
in high school, let me think. Well, I belonged to the BBGs, but other in high school and any of the things, I was a room monitor a year or so. I worked on the Register, the newspaper, for about a year. But other than that, I guess I really didn't get into too much.
When did you meet Harold?
Well, this was really funny. It was in the summer. It was probably, it could be June. And I was over to my girlfriend Dorothy Perlman's house, and she lived on 20th Street. And lo and behold, Harold and his parents just moved in next door to Dorothy Perlman. His sister lived there. And somehow, I think where they were living, the house was going for sale, I guess. And so they had to move out. So they decided they'd move in with Harold's sister, and it was right next door to Dorothy. So one day, Harold's sister says to Harold, "There's an awfully cute girl over at Dorothy's house on the porch. Come see." And so he looked over, and then Dorothy was going with some fella, and the fella was a friend of Harold's, my husband. And they decided that they would call and ask me to go with Harold. So they did, and I said, okay. And so Harold came and he picked me up, and we went swimming at Peony Park. And after that, it was just Harold and I. From that moment on, it clicked, let's put it that way. And that was in June, and I was still in high school, and Harold was going to Omaha U. And so, let's see, that would have been June. So January, the next June, I graduated, and that in January of '49 we got married, and Harold still had college to finish. He finished that August of '49.
I want to hear about your wedding.
My wedding, okay. My wedding was really very nice. It was at the Paxton Ballroom, which who knows what it is today, maybe apartments. And it was in January. Needless to say, it was a horrible day. We thought nobody would show up. It was raining, and the rain turned to sleet, and then it snowed, and the temperature was so cold. But lo and behold, I think everybody showed up. And so it was, I had bridesmaids. I had Dorothy Perlman. I had my cousin Ruthie Krantz that came in from Des Moines. I had Adele Chazanoff. And I had, isn't that awful? I can't remember her name. It'll come to me. I had one other bridesmaid, and Harold had his groomsmen. He had Fred Shorman and Eddie Cookland and Norman Abrahamson, his brother, and his brother-in-law Jack Epstein. And it really was a very nice wedding. And after the wedding, we went to our cousin's house, Frances Blumkin's mother, Jenny. Was it Jenny? Jenny Beetzer? Yes, it was Jenny. We went to her house for the Shiva Bruchas. And it ended up being more people than we really asked. And I won't say who asked the rest, but anyway, it was very nice. And then the next morning, that night we went to our apartment, which was 504 South 25th Avenue, in the basement. But anyway, I almost had to carry Harold over the threshold because I ran in the main door of the apartment building and went down and opened the door to our basement apartment, and the steps were just covered, almost where you couldn't see him. And so he came through that way. And the next morning we got up and we got on the train and we went to Chicago. Well, Harold's aunt from Chicago came to visit us, so she was on the train back to Chicago with us. And we went to see a play, and we went to dinners, and the aunt invited us over to her house because I didn't know the rest of the family. And so Harold said, well, we'll just go on the bus or the streetcar, I don't remember which it was. And by the time we got to the aunt's house, we were soaked. It had been raining and snowing, and so she had put my coat up in the bathroom on a hanger and let it drip dry, and it was fur. Well, anyway, and she made a beautiful dinner, she really did, and I got to meet his cousins and his uncle, and we had a real nice evening. And after that, we went back to the hotel, and I think we were only there, I don't even think we were there a week, and we came back, because I think this was the semester break in January, and so we had to come back because Harold had to go back to college, and he went back to UNO. And in the meantime, Harold's dad decided he would buy a little confectionery store on Leavenworth, and I think it was 29th and Leavenworth, and he sold ice cream and pop, and and Harold made candy cotton. And that was a job. And while he was making candy cotton one day, I don't remember what I did, but a hunk of the candy cotton fell on him and burned him really, really badly. But he seemed to have gotten over it. But anyway, we were running the store for Harold's dad for a while, and we had no transportation, so Harold's dad went and bought a little Crosley, and I'm sure most people won't even know what a Crosley is, but it was a little station wagon, a little red station wagon, and so he got to drive that to college and then drive over to Leavenworth, and I would open up in the morning the confectionery store. And so that's what we did till he graduated. And in the winter time, when he parked this little Crosley at UNO, his fraternity brothers would have a good time in lifting it up and moving it, like in the wrong direction or in the wrong place, and he'd come out and he'd have to look for it. And he would a lot of times just tell them, pile in, and he would drive them to wherever they wanted to go. And so he had a good time with the Crosley. And let's see, he graduated in August of 49, and lo and behold, I became pregnant. And so when he finished college, he decided he would go to Audubon, Iowa, and help his brother out in the shoe store. And so we went and we lived in Audubon for a while. And then when it was time where I would have the baby, I came back to Omaha and I stayed with my mother and grandparents. And Harold, let's see, Harold, what did he do? I almost have to ask him because I think he was teaching some, well, I'll have to ask him later. Anyway, he stayed in Audubon, and then when we were going to move to Denison, Iowa, because his brother decided to open up another shoe store, and he would let Harold handle that shoe store. And so Harold had to go into Denison, Iowa, and Francie and Paul Rubeck lived there. And so he sort of stayed with them and kind of looked around for an apartment for whenever after I had the baby, then we would move to Denison, Iowa. So I had Mark that when I first went to the doctor, he says, you're going to have a gobbler for Thanksgiving. And sure enough, in 1949, November 24th, I had Mark on Thanksgiving. And Harold zoomed back into Omaha because he wasn't there when he got the message, and he came on Thanksgiving Day, and he brought this beautiful bouquet of flowers, and as he was carrying it, the water dripped all the way down on his suit. And so anyway, I stayed here till, let's see, I had Mark November 24th. I stayed till January, and then I moved down into Denison, Iowa with Harold, and we had an upstairs apartment, and we lived there. We didn't live there too long. We lived there from January, I believe, till June or July, and we decided that kind of life really wasn't our kind of life, so we moved back to Omaha. And we didn't have an apartment, needless to say, so we moved in again with my mother and grandparents, and started looking for an apartment, and we found one on North 16th Street, the La Grata Court, and we moved in there, and I became pregnant again, and I had Bruce, and after that we decided the apartment was getting a little bit too small for us, so we moved into a little house on 33rd and Reddick out north, a little brick house. It really was a little house. It had a kitchen and a living room and a bathroom and three bedrooms. So we put the boys together, and we separated the boys, that's right. They each had a bedroom, and we had the third bedroom. And it was that way for a while. And then in 1958, I had a little girl, Eileen. And so we had to put the boys together in one bedroom, and Eileen got one of the boys' bedroom. And so we were there till 1960. And in 1960, we bought a lot at 78th and Jackson and started building on it. And we didn't really break ground until, I believe it was December or January. We broke ground, and we had it all dug out, and it snowed, and the whole place that was going to be the basement was just covered with snow. And after that we had started building the top part, and we had to get a sub pump and have it running all the melting the snow and running it out into the street. And we finally got that taken care of, and then we finished building the house, and we moved in July of 1960, and this is 2006, and we're still at 78th and Jackson. So
Let's go back, and I want you to tell me about who was the rabbi when you got married.
the rabbi when we got married was Rabbi Moskowitz, and we really did like him a lot. He just was a super guy. Just enjoyed him so much, but he really didn't stay in Omaha too long after that. And we could not be married, we could not be married at Beth Israel because it was being built. And so that's why we had to get married at the Paxton. And that.
Now, what did Harold do when you moved back to Omaha?
When we moved back to Omaha, Harold worked at, at Watson Transportation. And he worked the night shift. So he would be sleeping during the day, and I would try to keep the babies quiet, and he would work during the night. And he'd come home, really early in the morning and go back to sleep again. So that was our life for a while. And then after that, I don't really remember where he worked, but I know eventually he worked at Aaron Fair and Sons. And my mother worked there also. And he worked there for quite a while. And then, I don't know what happened, but he decided he wanted to do something else. So he I don't know if he answered an ad or if I don't really recall exactly what happened, but he went to work for Hockenberg's Fixture, and he really liked that a lot. He was the one that did all the drawings and the layouts of the different businesses that had to be built or redone, and the kitchens that usually are some of the parts of the restaurant that get very, very shabbily very quickly because of all the grease and the oil and the cooking that goes on in there. And he was there for quite a while. And then he decided he wanted to be on his own, and he wanted to be isn't that terrible? A consultant. He wanted to be a consultant on kitchens or buildings, whatever. So he did that for a while, and then one day Harold's friend Jerry Berman came over, and he says, Harold, he says, there's something here and I think you would like it. We could go into business together, and we could have a fixture company. This man wants to sell out. He's all by himself, and he's already elderly, and he has a young man that drives and delivers his stuff, and he says it's just got too much for him. And he says he really wants to get out. So Harold went with Jerry, and they looked over the situation, and they decided how much money each one of them should put up, and they bought Exarban Fixture. And I really can't remember the year it was. I would say in the 70s. Yeah, probably. And so and it was downtown, and it was on, I believe it was on 16th and Harney. And so they were there for a while, and then they decided they would look for lots. And this lot came up over here on 66th and Grover, and they looked it over and they thought, yeah, that's a good one. And so they put money down on the lot and they bought it. And then they started building, and they built the building, and they moved into it, and you know what, the time escapes me as to what year it was. I'd have to get information from my husband, but anyway, they moved in, and they did really nicely there. It was a nice location, and it was a nice building, and their business was good. And then it came to retirement time, so Harold decided he would retire, and Jerry said no, he wasn't ready to retire. Jerry was quite a bit younger than Harold. So anyway, Harold retired, and Jerry ran the business for a while. And then they got an offer, and Jerry decided it was time that he got out of the business too. So they sold it to I think it's 3 or 4 fellas that own it now, and Jerry got out also. And the Exarban fixture is still there on 66th and Grover, and it's doing very nicely with the new owners. They're not so new anymore, but they're doing good. And
When you got out of high school, about the time you were getting married, did you work for a while?
no, I really didn't work for a while. Well, actually, I got pregnant in that winter, and I was really sick for about 3 months, and so I know I would get on the streetcar and go downtown and meet my mother for lunch, and by the time I got home, back to the apartment, I was very sick, so no, I couldn't. I didn't get a chance, but later on, quite a bit later on, I did do little jobs. I worked for my sister-in-law Louise. She had some kind of I don't even remember what business it was, and I helped her out in the office. And then I worked for the Israel Bond office, and I worked when my mother married Joe Sosnick. I worked in his grocery store for a little bit to help him out, but nothing that was steady or anything, just helping out. I did volunteer work. I was at Children's Hospital at the information desk for 22 years. I just retired maybe 3 years ago.
That was as a volunteer?
That was a volunteer.
Well, how has life been since Harold retired?
Oh, life has been really fine since he retired. We had, getting used to each other, but other than that, it's been fine. We've gone on trips and gone down to the zoo and spent some time. Of course, this last 2 years have not been good because Harold has not been well. But before then, we did lots of things. We really did.
I'd like you to talk to me a little bit about your children.
About my children, okay. Mark is our oldest, and he married Linda Fedman in 1972, somewhere in there. And Mark does kitchen designing and layouts. He took after his dad, and he's working for Hockenberg Fixture. And he used to work for Hockenberg's when Harold did on his summer vacations when he was still in high school. And he would go there and work this summer. So Mark knows pretty good about kitchen designing. And he's at Hockenberg's now. And Mark and Linda have 2 daughters. They have Amy, who's 22, and Julie, I believe, is probably 20. And they're both married. And Amy has a little boy, Max, and Max will be 2 years old in September. And Linda works at the Jocelyn School. I can't remember exactly what she does. I think she handles the kitchen as children go through it and make sure that they don't throw food or just make the line go smoothly at lunchtime. And sometimes she works later in the day when some children have to stay and their parents work and they aren't picked up till after 5. She goes back there and she handles those children too. So that's what Mark and Linda's life is like. And they live out, they live out by, off of Blondo at 120th. So they live on 120th, whatever that street is. I just don't remember what it is, but that's their vicinity. And then Bruce and Gay went down to Lincoln, and they went to college. And Bruce he graduated, but then he came back to Omaha, and he went to Creighton, and he became a lawyer. And they were married. I think, a year after Linda and Mark. And let's see. Gay worked and Bruce finished college, and then he met a fella that I don't know where he met this fella, but they opened up a law office, and it was out north. It was past Maple. What's the street after Maple? I don't remember. Well, anyway, it was out north, and they had their office there, and then they decided they would move in further. So they had an office at 84th and Dodge, and they were doing nicely. And then for some reason, they decided to split up. I don't know if it was words or whatever, but anyway, the fella was a Gunderson. He stayed at the office, and Bruce went went into another office on, that's 114th and Dodge in that office building. It was a bank on the main floor, and he was upstairs in an office there. And he, is that the last one he was in? No, then after that, he went into an office at 84th and Dodge. And he passed away in February of 2000. And I forgot to say that they have 2 children. They have Chris and Danielle, and we call her Deanie. And Chris graduated college, and he has a nice job with a pharmaceutical company. And Deanie is now going back. She graduated college, but she's going back now and get a degree in nursing of some type. And Deanie and Scott have a little boy, Chris has the little boy Isaac, and Deanie has the little boy Cameron. And so we have 3 great-grandsons. We have Isaac and Cameron and Max. And so, let's see, what else? I don't know what else.
How about your daughter?
How did I leave her out? And our 3rd child was Eileen. And Eileen went to college in Lawrence, Kansas. And then she came back and finished at UNO. And she met a nice young man, Stan Edelstein, that was from Denver, but came to Omaha and was working. Isn't that terrible? I forgot the name of where he was working. The one that went under. What was the name of it? Well, anyway, we'll get back to that. Anyway, they got married after Eileen finished college, and in January, and we had a real nice wedding at Bethel for them. It was very, very nice, and a lot of Stan's family came in from Denver, and it was January and it was cold, but we had a very, very nice time at the wedding. And Pace Setter is where Stan worked for many, many years since he came to Omaha. And Eileen finished, and she got a teaching job, and she was teaching school. I think she was teaching third or fourth grade, either when she was helping out at the school and teaching. And Stan was at Pace Setter. And then in, 22 years ago, they had Sarah. I don't remember the year. Sorry about that. But anyway, 22 years ago, they had Sarah. She was a preemie, and she was a twin. And Eileen went into labor very early. She went into labor in March, and she really wasn't supposed to have the babies until June. And so, since she went into labor, she was in the hospital, and they delivered both babies. And during the night, the little boy became very, very ill. He wasn't well when he was born, and he passed away. And Sarah just seemed, at first she was in intensive care from March until May. And it was touch and go with Sarah too, but she thrived and she made it. And like I say, she's 22 now, and she just graduated college down in Lawrence, Kansas, and she's here working at the Nebraska Medical Hospital. She wants to be a physical therapist, So she's going to do a year of working, and then she's going back to college and she has to do 3 years, and then she'll be a physical therapist. And Sammy, their next child, is 20, and he's down at Lawrence, Kansas, and he's in architectural school. And this is a 5-year course, and this is going to be his 3rd year. So after that, he'll have 2 more to go, and then he'll graduate. Actually, he'll graduate in 4 years, but he has 1 more year after that to go. And then dear little Julia, she's 10 years old, and she's just a darling child and smart. Very, very, very smart. And she goes to the school across the street from where they live, and she does very well. And she does swimming, and she's taken dancing lessons, and I don't know, she's into a lot of different activities. Julia likes to be busy, so I'm sure that she's going to grow up and be a special young lady. She's a young lady right now, really. She's not a child. I could just sit and talk to her just like I'm talking to this machine, and she would understand everything. She's just one of those kids, you know. I guess with 2 older siblings, she's just been introduced to a lot of things, where if you're the one and only, you probably aren't. So she's a great girl. She really is a darling girl. Besides that, she's very pretty. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the grandmother, but she is. She's just special. I would like to say a few words to my children. Mark and Linda, since you are the eldest, and to your children, Julie and Amy, and spouses, I wish you all the luck, and may you have a beautiful life together. To Gay, and to Chris, and to Deanie, I send you my warmest regards and just wish you have a real happy life. To Stan and Eileen, and Sarah and Sammy and Julia, I send you my love, and just have a beautiful life and live it. And now one final word. I love each and every one of you. This is the wedding of Julie and John, year 2002. On the left is our grandson Chris, and Chris is holding his son Isaac and his friend Kim. Next is Chris and Amy, and they were married the year of 2001. Then it's Julie and John, their wedding. Next is Sammy and his dad Stan, his mother Eileen, his sister Sarah, and on the very end is Deanie, who's a sister to Chris Abrahamson, who was the very first one on the left side. We are going down now to the main one, and it's Mark and Linda Abrahamson, and Helen and Harold Abrahamson, and Julia, daughter of Stan and Eileen Edelstein, and Gay Abrahamson, mother of Chris and Deanie Abrahamson.